Hello, this is Deanne from Small But Kinda Mighty, and by popular request, I am sharing in this video how I seam granny squares together using single crochet. If you're wondering how to make a granny square, then I do have another video that you should check out, which goes through step by step how to crochet a granny. There are lots of different methods for joining together pieces of crocheted fabric. If you are looking to put together squares in order to create a blanket, then I recommend that you crochet your squares together. And there are several ways that you can crochet them together, but in this video I'm going to demonstrate how you can single crochet them. There are also different methods of sewing together pieces of crochet fabric, and if you're interested in learning how to do that, then I also have a video which goes through one method, the whip stitch, which can be useful for joining granny squares and also amigurumi pieces. Ideally, you will have made your granny squares. You will have put a single crochet edge around each side of each square. You will have blocked your granny squares. And if you want to save yourself the arduous chore of sewing in all of your yarn tails at once you've put them once you put the squares together, then you can sew in your yarn tails and then your squares are ready for joining. Once your squares are ready to be joined together, then the first part of the process is to put them down in the order in which you want them to be in your blanket and ensure that they are right side facing up. Once you've got your squares laid out in the order in which you want them, then you're going to join your squares together to make panels. So in the case of this little 6 square project, what I'm going to do is join them together along the horizontal middle seam, and then I'm going to join the 2 vertical seams together. So if you've got a larger project, then you will want to do all the horizontal seams first, followed by the vertical ones. Or you can do the vertical ones first, followed by the horizontal. But my recommendation is that you at least do them in the same order with respect to the orientation. So for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm using a colour that contrasts with my edging colour, which is like a dark olive green. But for the actual joining together, I would be using the same colour yarn because that's the look that I want to go for this blanket. When I edged my granny squares, I put 3 single crochet stitches in each corner space. So what we are going to start with is finding that middle single crochet stitch from the corner space, and we're going to join our yarn in that spot. So I found that middle stitch and I'm inserting my hook under both loops of the head of that stitch. And then with the other granny square, I'm going to do the exact same. So I've got my hook inserted in the middle stitch of each corner space. And now I'm going to attach my yarn with a slip stitch. So I'm going to yarn over and pull through the loop on my hook. Next I'm going to do a chain 1, and then I'm going to insert my hook in the exact same space and make a single crochet. For these first few single crochet stitches, I'm going to crochet over my yarn tail to keep it nice and secure until I've finished doing all of my joining. Now you can continue to insert your hook under both loops of the heads of each of the single crochet stitches from the squares that you're joining together. This is like a really secure method of joining your squares together, but the possible downside is that it tends to result in the heads of your single crochet stitches leaning to one side, and some people don't like that look. So I'm going to demonstrate what you can do to avoid that lean, which is inserting your hook under just the outside loops of each of the single crochet stitches. So it would be the front loop only of the stitch that is facing you and the corresponding front loop only of the stitch on the other square. Okay, so I'm going to go under that outside loop, that front loop, and then under the outside loop of the corresponding stitch from the other square, and then make a single crochet as normal. And I'm going to continue to do that. Insert my hook under the outside loops of each of the stitches from the granny square that you are placing together. Now, what I've got here is a square that is ever so slightly smaller than its counterpart, and so I may have the same number of stitches in each square. It could just be a question of one of the squares working up smaller than the other because of tension. Or it could be that you have squares that are actually a different size. So the number of stitches in one square is not the same as the number of stitches along the side of the other square. So if that happens, I'm going to show you how you can compensate for that. It basically involves skipping a stitch or two from the square that is slightly wider. So I'm going to insert my hook under the outside loop of the next stitch. and that results in me ending up having the same number of stitches, so that I can for the remaining stitches I don't have to skip any in order to compensate for any size difference. So I'm just going back and starting using my actual yarn that I'm using for seaming these squares. I did exactly what I did before, joined the yarn with a slip stitch, then did a chain 1 and single crocheted in the same spot under both loops of the head of each of the middle stitches in the corner squares, in the corner spaces of each of those granny squares. Now I've switched to just working under the outside loops of each of those stitches, and I am crocheting over the top of my yarn tail to keep it nice and secure while I do all of my seaming. So now I'm getting close to the end of the first set of squares, and I'm approaching my next corner space. So I'm going to count how many stitches I have left. So that's 4 stitches on that side, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches on the other square. So I know I'm going to have to skip 2 stitches from the second square in order to ensure that I end up in the same space. So I skipped 1. Now I'm going to work in the next stitch. Then I will skip 1 stitch on the other square and work into the following stitch. And now I come to the middle stitch of the corner. And for those middle stitches in the corner spaces, I didn't do it here, but I'm going to do it in the rest of them. I recommend going under both loops of the head of those middle stitches, just because those are going to be areas which will see a lot of strain and take a lot of wear. And now I'm going to seam along the horizontal of the middle 2 squares. So I'm going to grab those squares, find those middle stitches in the corner spaces, and insert my hook under both loops of the head of the corresponding middle stitches, and then make a single crochet. So that's the first one, and now I'm going to go under both loops of that middle stitch from the second and make my first single crochet. And now I will switch back to just inserting my hook under those outside loops of each of the single crochet stitches in my edge. So when I get to the next corner, I'm going to go under both loops of the head of each of those middle stitches. And now I'm going to seam along the horizontal of the last two granny squares. So again, I've inserted my hook under both loops of the head of each of those middle stitches in the corners, and now I'm switching back to just inserting my hook under the outside loops of each of those single crochet stitches and single crocheting them together. Now what I'm going to do is seam together the verticals. So I'm going to demonstrate how you do that. It's not really any different. The only thing that's a little bit different is what you do when you reach the corners. So I'm again going under both loops of the head of the middle corner stitch from each of those squares, and joining my yarn with a slip stitch, doing a chain one, inserting my hook into the same space and making my first single crochet. For the first few stitches, I'm going to crochet over the top of my yarn tail. Now I'm going to just insert my hook under the outside loops of each stitch, corresponding stitch from each square, and single crochet. And I'm going to continue to do that along the sides of both of those squares, checking as I go to see if my stitches are evenly matched. Once you reach your first corner that you already joined together along the horizontal, you're going to chain one to jump across your seam and then continue seaming the next two squares together as normal. Alright, so there's my chain one, and I'm going to hop across to the other two squares and start single crocheting them together. So to start, I single crocheted across the horizontal, then I rotated my work, and now I'm going to seam along the vertical areas, and I attached my yarn in the exact same way and seamed them in the exact same way. I crocheted over the top of my starting yarn tail, so I'm now going to pull that through to the back of my work. Once I got to the area where I already had a horizontal seam, I did a chain 1 in order to get across that seam, and then continued to join my squares together in the same fashion. So I would recommend putting an edge around this new piece of material before you then add a border, if you're planning on adding a border to your blanket. So I would attach my yarn in the top right middle corner stitch, and then single crochet around the edge, doing the same thing when you reach a seam, like doing a chain 1 in order to jump across it. I hope that was helpful, and I will hopefully see you again in my next video. Thanks, bye.